When Andy asked me to speak about, I don't know, several months ago, on Sabbath, I was like, okay, I've got this. I'm a person of routine. I'm a person of habit. Like this, I've got this. So when I started thinking about tying my message all in this morning, I thought about last Thanksgiving, Ryan and I took our family on a trip to the mountains. And while we were there, one of our girls, Chloe, who had just gone to college last fall, started complaining that she didn't feel great. She'd be like, I don't feel very good. My heart rate's kind of elevated, that kind of thing. And I am not a super worry kind of mom. Sometimes not to the benefit of my family. So she's saying, like, I don't feel good. And I'm like, well, you're probably out of shape. You probably need to go to the gym. We're in the mountains, there's altitude. And so I'm explaining these symptoms. She looks perfectly fine to me. So we continue through the vacation. We have a great time. The kids are playing games. We had great food. Ryan made a couple of turkeys. The girls helped me make all kinds of sides. It was a really nice time. We get home to Hugoton. It's time to get out to Christmas decorations and put the tree up and all that kind of thing. And so Ryan gets those out of the attic, and I'm like, okay, girls, help me with this. And I asked Chloe and Zoe to take this tree that we put downstairs down there, and she's kind of like super dramatic. She's like, I'm telling you, I don't feel good. And I'm like, okay, well, you seemed fine 5 minutes ago, so you're fine. So they go put the tree up. She goes back to college a couple of days later. She goes back to her apartment. So Monday she calls and she's like, something is wrong. I don't feel good. I said, okay, you know what? One time I had some chest pains and stuff, and I go to the doctor and they told me my back was out and that I needed to go to the chiropractor. And I said, same thing happened to your dad. He thought he was having a heart attack last year one time and he had to go to the chiropractor. So just go to the chiropractor. She goes to the chiropractor that day, a little bit of relief. And later, I was actually here, she calls me and I could tell, she was like, Mom, I am not okay. I'm not okay, something is wrong. So I'm like, okay, well, I talked to a couple of my friends here. We were working on the Christmas choir stuff, and we were like, mitral valve prolapse. You probably have a heart condition. My mom had that. You probably have it too. So that's no big deal. Okay, so the next morning she wakes up and she's like, Mom, something is really wrong. And at this point, she really has my attention. Now, you have to know Chloe, and I love her. She is amazing, and she does all kinds of wonderful things. But she is a little bit strong-willed, and if she doesn't want to do something, she won't do it. She's also one of those that, like, if she has an opinion about, like, I said I don't feel good. I don't feel good. Oh, okay. So I said, okay, you need to go to the doctor. You need to go to the doctor. So she calls the doctor's office, tells them her symptoms, and they said, don't come here. Go straight to urgent care. So she calls, she goes, I'm on my way to urgent care because they told me, don't come there. Go straight to urgent care with these symptoms. So she's at the urgent care for about an hour, and she calls me. She says, hey, Mom, I have a pulmonary embolism in my lung. Now, I'm shook at this point. She's 18 years old. She's perfectly healthy. There's no reason that she should have a pulmonary embolism in her lungs, which blood clot in her lungs at 18 years old. There had been no trauma. There's none of these things that they're asking all these questions. So immediately I talk to Andy. I make arrangements. I head to Hutch so I can go to the next few appointments with her. And the doctor goes to tell her, like, hey, she had a trip to Denver planned. He's like, there's no way you're going to the mountains now. No elevation for you. The only thing you can do is leave from here in Hutch and go home. And you have to stop every hour and get out of the car. And you need to get some rest. So we get her things situated, and we go home, and we stop every hour along the way and get her out of the car, this, that, and the other. We get home that night, and it must have been a Wednesday night because it was our last Wednesday for the semester. And we get all of her stuff. We put her room downstairs, where it's quiet. Okay, we've got all your things in a place where you can rest, and I'm going to go take care of some things that I've got going on tonight, but you rest. And so I assume that's what's happening. I come home, and she and Ryan are mad at each other. And her version of the story is, Dad yelled at me. But his version of the story was much more passionate, and so I'm more compelled to take his version of the story. So we put her in the basement. We had made sure she had all the things she needed down there. Well, she kept coming upstairs. Okay, you have blood clots in your lungs. So probably navigating the stairs, not the best of ideas. So she does this a couple times, and finally Ryan says, go downstairs. You can't come up the stairs. There's no reason for you to come up the stairs. The doctor told you to rest. I'm not asking you to go downstairs and rest. I am telling you, get down there and don't come back up until your blood clots are gone. So that conversation kind of made me think, wow, even in all of my hustle of getting to her and the doctor saying, no, she needs to rest, my idea of her needing to rest was different than Ryan's idea. My idea was to slow down and don't lift heavy things. But Ryan's idea was to go rest. Do not walk back up those stairs. And so it got me thinking about how we are as a culture. We live in this time of, we have more conveniences than ever, more information than ever at any time before, more safety information. Everything has a safety label on it. It's safety features on every vehicle. Ryan's pickup, you don't have to put your hands on the steering wheel. Like it does all the things. Like he doesn't have to, well, he does, but you know what I'm saying? So what does that tell us? It tells us that there's something about the way we are doing life that with all of these conveniences, all of these safety features, all of this information that we have, we can Google anything. We can Google anything. All this information, and we have more anxiety and illness than ever before. Why is that? And I think one of the reasons why is because we don't take time to rest. There's something about the way we do life that is not conducive to us flourishing. Our rapid, busy pace is leading us not to restoration, but to exhaustion. There's something wrong with the rhythms of the way that we are doing our lives. And we get going so fast that sometimes we can't even figure out how to slow down. Ryan told me here, I'm glad he told me after the fact, but a guy at work got a really cool car, and they took off down the blacktop over by Ryan's office, and Ryan said for a split second, we were going so fast that the nose started to come up, and he was like, for a split second, I was scared. And guys let off the gas, and they were fine. But he had to let off the gas. If he had continued at that speed, at that pace, that lift that was causing them to lose their rhythm would have done some real damage. So there comes a point in time when our pace and our speed, they can become dangerous for us. And as people, we get so confused and we get so focused on moving ahead, and many of us don't even know how to slow down. I guarantee there is someone in here that goes, I cannot sit down and watch a movie with my family. If the dryer goes off, I've got to get up. If there is a dish in my sink, I've got to go take care of it. If the grass needs mowed, I just can't relax. And I'm going to say, maybe think about, is that healthy? So what can we do? One thing that I've learned on this journey with Chloe, through a lot of Google and research, is the importance of rhythm in our lives. The circadian rhythm is our physical, mental, and behavioral changes that follow a 24-hour cycle, and it's in response to the light and the dark. It's how it affects us. When I started researching so that I could help Chloe, I kept coming across information about the importance of this rhythm and the rest and how important these things are for us to flourish. So it was an eye-opener for me. And I stopped worrying about the steps on my watch. How many of you guys look, I know generally how many steps I get a day on my watch. But I stopped focusing on the number of steps because I already knew I got that. That's covered. And I started focusing on making sure that I had my watch on when I went to bed at night so that I could see what kind of rest, what kind of sleep I was getting at night. So when we look at Scripture, and if you have your Bibles, we're going to be in Genesis chapter 2. When we look at Scripture, we see that God created us and gave us some pretty clear instructions right from the very beginning. God set the rhythm of this world, and in that, he included Sabbath. In the rhythm that he set, in the design that he set, he included rest. So Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the hosts of them. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on that seventh day from all of his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all of the work that he had done. Now, when you think about that, there's three things that I kind of take away from the scriptures this morning. Number one, God made Sabbath part of the rhythm that he intended for us. Now, we didn't look at those verses and it didn't tell us like God got to the end of that 6th day and he was like, oh my goodness, I'm so tired. I've been creating all week long and now I've got to rest. It doesn't say like God was exhausted. It just said that he wanted to take a day to recognize. Like he wasn't exhausted. He said, I'm making a decision that I've worked for 6 days and now on this 7th day, I'm going to stop. And not just stop, but he said he would bless that 7th day and call it holy. And we think of holy as the opposite of sin. But that's not accurate. When something is holy, it is actually different, set apart, not common. And so God is telling us that the Sabbath day, the time that we Sabbath and rest, is not common. It's different from the other days. There's something unique about it. It's set apart and not common. The second thing that we learn is Sabbath later is a command. All through Scripture, God continues to remind us that the Sabbath is to keep the Sabbath and it's holy. I started a new journal Bible reading this year, and as I'm navigating through the Old Testament, which I've done many times before, it's broken down where I'm comprehending what I'm reading more intentionally. And as I'm doing so, I'm recognizing that he talks about Sabbath a lot. It's not like this mild little suggestion. It's kind of like the doctor suggested that Chloe take a rest, that she not be so on such a go pace. And it wasn't until her father said, rest. So we realize that on the way to the promised land in Exodus 16, as Moses is leading the Israelites to the desert, God shows up and says, okay, I'm going to send you this stuff called manna, and I'm going to send it on 6 days. And on that 6th day, I want you to gather double. Gather twice as much as you do on the other days, and you're going to bake what you're going to bake, and you boil what you're going to boil, but you're going to be covered, so on that 7th day, you can rest. So Moses makes sure the people all know, hey, this stuff's coming, it's manna, you're going to gather it, you're going to gather extra on that 6th day, and on the 7th day, no gathering. But those people, even though there was enough sent, there was this worry that they had, and so they actually were like looking to gather on that 7th day. Resting on that 7th day would have been an act of faith. It would have been something that showed that they believed God and that he would take care of them. But what they did was they didn't trust God for provision. And God was like, what? Wait a minute. So the reality is we can be a lot like the Israelites. The next thing the Israelites see is that God goes from explaining the Sabbath and talking like, hey, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy, to he makes it a command. So he says in the 10 Commandments, Exodus 20, 8-10, he said, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But on the 7th day, it is the Sabbath to the Lord your God. And on it you shall not do any work, not you or your sons or your daughters or your male servants or your female servants or your livestock or any foreigner who is in your gates. So for in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth and the sea and all that is in them, and he rested on the 7th day. And therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So God blessed the Sabbath, meaning that he is gifting it to us. It is a gift to us. He is giving it to each of us for life-generating power. He calls this day holy, and we know that now holy is different, not common. It is different. And this is a gift. This is a unique gift. In those 7 days, this one day is uniquely different. So when we go nonstop 7 days a week and we don't stop and we're telling God, we can trust that we cannot trust him. God has set the standard for our rhythm. He is clear that a good rhythm requires rest. So think about worship this morning. I love it because I love to watch everybody get pumped up. I love being part of the worship team. But I think about them this morning. And I've learned a lot being on the worship team. I didn't grow up in choir and things like that, but I know that the instrumentalists are very important. And I know that in order to keep good rhythm, the drummer has a really big job. Like when we're singing, he can tell if we're starting to slow down too much, or he can tell if we're starting to go too fast, and he can adjust the rhythm. But if he just beat on those drums, if Jose had just got in there and beat those drums this morning, boom, 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 there would have been no rhythm. There would have been no structure. It would not have been the beautiful experience that we had. It would have been much different because he wouldn't have rested. But because when those guys step in that drum cage, they know the value of rest, it changes the rhythm of worship. And so the lack of rest would mean chaos. And we have to recognize that that's true for our lives. The lack of rest brings chaos. There are many of us today who are so tired. Our lives are going nonstop, and that is just not sustainable. At some point, we will become so tired and overwhelmed that the stresses of life will get heavy, and we'll be like a toddler. And God will be going, go take a nap. Ryan's mom tells, like, when he was little, that he didn't want to take a nap. And she'd be like, I'd say, Ryan, it's time to take a nap. And he would go, I'm never going to take a nap. I'm never going to go to sleep. And I think we're much like that with God when it comes to the Sabbath. I don't have time to Sabbath. I don't have time to rest. I've got things to do. And God's like, could you just go lay down? Go take a minute. Go take a break and come back and you'll be refreshed. Go take a nap. And instead, we fight with him. So I want to encourage you today that if we're not careful, we're going to be like a bunch of toddlers refusing to take a nap, and God just going, man, go lay down. But if we want to function well, we need rest. The third thing is that the Sabbath points us to Jesus. We see in the New Testament several times that Jesus gets called out by the Pharisees for healing people on the Sabbath. The Sabbath is not meant to be oppressive. It's not meant to keep us in some type of bondage and chains. In fact, it's supposed to be freedom and restorativeness that comes from that. But in Mark, Jesus gets in trouble. He and the disciples are walking through a field and they're grabbing heads of wheat as they go and they're rubbing it between their hands and popping it in their mouth. And the Pharisees come, they're like, yeah, that's technically harvest. And harvest is not okay on Sabbath. And Jesus is like, okay, thanks. So then there's this guy, and he has a withered hand. So Jesus says to the Pharisees, so you're telling me this guy needs healing, and I'm here and I can do it, but it's the Sabbath, so I'm going to just need to tell him to continue on his way? And the Pharisees are like, oh, buddy, you're messing with the laws now. And Jesus heals the guy's hand. And the Pharisees are really like, man, you can't do that on the Sabbath. And so I think that he was trying to remind them, like, hey, I am the Lord of the Sabbath. I am the reason. I am the rest. And so I'm going to do my Father's work on the Sabbath. And so I think that sometimes we have to be careful. We recognize Jesus is the Lord of our Sabbath, but we'll take verses like this in these moments where Jesus did things and ministered on the Sabbath, and we use those to justify our lifestyles. We use that to justify the pace that we're keeping. And we will point out, well, Jesus did some things on the Sabbath, so, but yes, he did. However, everything he did for the Father in heaven. Us refusing to rest is not the same. It's not the same at all. Clearly, our culture is different than it was in Moses' day or in Jesus' day. But the concept of rest and the need for rest are still relevant for us today. So maybe your job and your work schedule, it doesn't allow you to always take Sundays off. I get it. My dad worked shift work when I was a kid. He worked for what was Mobil Oil back in the day, and some days he worked days, some days he worked nights, some days he worked weekends, some days he didn't. It just, and we had to adjust as a family. But one thing I've learned to appreciate from Pastor Andy is that he finds rest important. And not like just go like veg out and watch TV, which there is a time for that, but actual true rest. And so he's kind of declared Fridays. It's very rare that you'll see all of us down here on Fridays. I'm not saying you'll never see us down here on Fridays because we're busy on Sundays. There's a lot of things that we tend to on Sunday mornings and we get up early. And so at least the first half of our Sunday doesn't necessarily look like a lot of rest, but we love it. And we're devoting that time to God and to being here to help everybody come in and be able to experience God in just an amazing way. So in order to do that, Andy's like, hey, on Fridays, I really don't want to see you guys down here. Unless it's absolutely necessary, I want you to take Fridays as your Sabbath day. And he's been pretty diligent about that with us. And even when we get into these busy seasons and different things going on, like he'll like, hey guys, have you had some time to rest? Have you taken some time to rest? And I appreciate that and I value that because rest is important. And I appreciate that he tries to require that of us as a staff. So rest and spend time with your families, connect with God, connect with friends, get focused on your week ahead. Parents, I want to encourage you to help your kids with this. This is something that Ryan and I have been trying to learn how to do and help our kids with, and we didn't do so great with the older ones because, just go and go and go and go, and our oldest son really struggled with learning how to just relax, kind of like his dad. I don't think Ryan actually sat down in an evening until summer of 2018. I met Ryan when he was 19 years old. Yeah, it was the summer of 2018 before I saw that man actually sit down and go, just some time is good. So I want to encourage you to also, as you're setting that example, help your kids navigate that. And it can be difficult for our kids to navigate with busy lives, and we forget that they need rest too. So Jewish people still today consider the Sabbath on Friday into Saturday night. And as Gentiles, as Christians, we typically observe the Sabbath on Sunday. But your work schedule may require that you get creative in how you choose to have that time of rest. And you may need to adjust your schedule based on your work schedule or your family schedule. But I want you to understand the importance of taking time for your Sabbath. It is so necessary for us. Jesus is the Lord of our Sabbath, so let's observe the Sabbath, keep it holy, make it uncommon, celebrate Jesus in our homes, and make it part of the rhythm of our life and part of the rest that we observe. Now, I'm going to give you 5 little things that may be helpful, because if you're like me, our family is a goer. We go. And probably it wasn't until I started working here and Andy was like, hey, what's your Sabbath day? I was like, Sunday sometimes? And it was like, oh, wait a minute. And like I said, I'm pretty structured. I get up in the morning. I have the same routine pretty much every morning. And so I was like, okay. So the first thing I'm going to encourage you to do is recognize your need for rest. Recognize that we all need rest. It's not a luxury. It's something that our bodies need. It's something that our minds need. It is something we personally need, and it is something that our families need. There are times that we just need a reset. When you think about your cell phone, sometimes our phones are acting crazy and weird, and then you go to the Verizon store and you go and you go, my phone is not working right. And you hand it over to the guy and he goes, 1, 2, 3, and your phone shuts down. And then he counts, and then he turns it back on. He goes, you just needed a reset. You haven't turned your phone off in a long time. And we can be like that. We just need a reset. We haven't turned things off in a long time. So the first thing is recognizing your need for Sabbath. The second is guard your Sabbath when possible. And I'm talking to you, like I said, I'm talking to you as someone who's gone at a pace that can be exhausting. And sometimes we've pushed ourselves and our kids but beyond far without rest. I can tell, especially Chloe and Zoe, when they don't get good rest, when they so we've started now trying to navigate that in a way that we will encourage them, like, hey, or we'll even say, you need a Sabbath today. And so guard it whenever you can. Rest is more than just going to bed at a decent time. And I think that we mistakenly think, okay, if I'm in bed by 10 or in bed by 11, I'm getting good sleep, and therefore that's rest. That is important, but that additional Sabbath rest is necessary. So I think back, Zoe's school schedule was crazy during times this year. When you're a middle school athlete, you are not as cool as the high school kids. So middle schoolers don't have priority when it comes to the gym or the football field or the track or whatever, at least not in Hugoton. And it's not that their middle school's not important, but hey, the high schoolers, or that's where we're going to go to these tournaments and state or whatever, and these kids are getting looked at by colleges. And so the middle school kids don't get priority. And so for Zoe to want to do wrestling or cross country meant that she had to be at school at like 6:30 in the morning. And so we get into cross country season, and she also helps with worship here on Wednesday nights. And so in order to be here on time on Wednesdays, she had to adjust her practice schedule so that she practiced in the morning and in the afternoon the other days of the week to make up for that missed practice on Wednesday afternoon. So there was one particular Thursday that she had gone to practice at 6 o'clock, 6:30. So she gets up at 6, she's at practice at 6:30. Goes to practice, and then she goes to school all day. And then there's a second practice, and she goes to that practice. And then when that practice is over, she has team dinner. And as she's finishing up team dinner, she gets in the car. It's like 8 o'clock at night, and she says, I've got to go clean my horse stall. I'm like, what? It's 8 o'clock. We're not going to go clean the horse stall. She goes, no, Nanny and Papa really want me to come do that. I haven't had time to do this week. I really have got to go do it. And we went ahead and took care of it that night. And it made me really think, like, she didn't want to be disrespectful. She loves her horse. She loves her grandparents. She didn't want to be disrespectful. But in that moment, she needed for me to help her guard her time, and I didn't. And so I'm learning from that recognizing when the rhythm is starting, when the beat's starting to beat like a drum, like if Jose just came in here and started banging on those drums nonstop, if rhythm of life is starting to look like that for me or my husband or my kids, I need to speak up. So now we navigate things together. So Zoe loves being active and involved with things, and she likes to help. She loves to, I don't know about any of you grandparents in here, but my husband's parents live in Hugoton. My kids see them pretty frequently. And by default, they've gotten pretty spoiled. My kids, not the grandparents. And so she likes to go over there and do things for them because they like to do things for her. And so one of the things in the summer she does is mow. And I was out of town last Sunday, and I knew that she had been, my girls' job share a job, and they do several different things. And so I got a hold of her after church on Sunday, and I said, hey, I want you to be proactive. I want you to go to your nanny and papa and say, hey, I know you guys like to mow on Sunday, but I need to know what day, Monday through Friday, I can come and mow, because my mom really wants me to take this day and rest so that I can be ready to face my week. And we have to be intentional about guarding that time. And sometimes it's a little bit uncomfortable because she had to like set a boundary and say, hey, I want to mow for you this week. I just can't do it today. I can't. And it's not because she had a list of a million things that she was doing. It was because she needed the rest. She needed that time. The other thing is that we need to connect with those that we love, those that we care about. I love, when I was a kid, I shared with a few weeks ago, whenever I was sharing, my grandmother, when I was growing up, we lived in Oklahoma, and she lived just down the road from us, and Sundays were amazing. My grandmother had this huge smoker that was, I don't even know, it makes a Traeger look like a toddler. There was this huge thing, and people from all over the community at holidays would come. But that's how my grandma, I grew up in Oklahoma, and that people like to eat down there. And so she would make a brisket, and she'd make a ham, and she'd make a roast, and she'd make pork chops and all these things. But she would start those on Saturday night. Now, True confession here. When I was younger, my grandmother was not saved. And so I learned a lot from my grandma that was not from Jesus. However, when I was a little older, she accepted Jesus, and that changed Sundays at her house. But she'd start on Saturday night, putting her casseroles together and getting the meat on the smoker so it could be slow cooking, this, that, and the other. And then on Sunday after church, we'd go over to my grandmother's, and my dad or my uncle would help slice up the meat or whatever, and we would feast. And then they'd sit around the table and just visit and talk, and me and my cousins would play, and there might be a football game come on the TV. And it was just this time. Think about your grandma's house. Man, think about your grandma's house. That is the place, man, you just go there. My kids go into their grandparents' house, Nanny and Papa's house, and they plop down in a chair and they put their feet up. They know where the snacks are, and there is just this comfort that comes from that. And so I would encourage you to find time for that to be part of your Sabbath. Or maybe Ryan has a friend, he's great, and he knew I'd been busy all week, and he loves spending time with Ryan. And so last night, he's like, hey, I'm gonna make hamburgers for you guys. And so we got to go over there, and so I was so thankful because I didn't have to mess up my kitchen. He just took care of us, and I appreciated that. And there's value in that. So connecting with people in that rest. Being able to build a daily rhythm into our routine. Starting our day with the Lord, meditating on his word. When we just finished up this push series with Andy, when he just finished that up a couple of weeks ago, he talked to us a lot about what happens when we start to focus and connect with God intentionally every morning. What happens when we begin to set the rhythms for our day? And after a while, you realize that your daily rhythm now influences not just your day, but your week. When you have that rhythm, it starts to actually become a pattern. So you look back and you realize that God has blessed that obedience. I'm realizing that when I am in this crazy hurry and I recognize, and then I stop and I start to be intentional about rest, I can see how God is blessing that obedience. So I would just encourage you to figure out how to incorporate that daily moment of quiet. So I shared with Andy yesterday, I'm a creature of habit. I get up in the morning and I get my coffee and this, that, and the other, and I have some time by myself, and I make breakfast for everybody. And then and I put devotions out at all the spots. I consider that the daily minimum for my family. I'm going to put your devotion at your spot at the kitchen table, but I'm going to need you and God to take care of what happens from there. And so I have my devotion, and then I have my Bible time that I do. And then I did this devotion. I finished it through a couple times. It's called Devotions for the Front Porch. And this time of year, I actually just put it so that it's by my front door. There's a table. And so it's not something that I do every day. It's something that I try to get to when it's nice. So yesterday morning, I watered my plants, and I thought, okay, I'm going to drink my coffee here, and I'm going to get out my devotion. And I opened it up, and it says, Sunday afternoon naps. If you lie down, you will not be afraid. And when you lie down, your sleep will be sweet. Proverbs 3:24. When you have children, sleep is the first thing that you lose. As infants, they keep you up all hours of the night. Then they begin climbing into your bed in the middle of the night, kicking you in the back and stealing your covers. And at some point, they get them to sleep in their own beds, only to wake up at the crack of dawn requesting breakfast. Occasionally, however, something beautiful takes place. On a Sunday afternoon, you get a nap. And whether it's on the couch, in a hammock, a blanket in the yard, or a Sunday afternoon, is a wise gift for a weary body. To close your eyes and snooze in the middle of the day seems positively decadent, which makes the sleep that much sweeter. Solomon knew the importance of wisdom in a person's life. Of all the things that he could have requested from God, he asked for wisdom, and God granted it. Solomon also knew the benefits of wisdom in his life. Wisdom allows a person to walk in security and peace. A wise person is a source of life to those around them. A foolish person makes foolish decisions and suffers the consequences. One of the first things often being troubled sleep. When worry and regret weigh heavy on our person's mind, sleep proves elusive. A wise person, however, makes prayerful decisions to trust God with the outcomes and sleeps like it's Sunday afternoon. I know what it's like, Lord, to endure sleepless nights. Give me wisdom that I may always find rest in you. And I thought it was not coincidental that I hadn't probably picked this up in 2 or 3 weeks, and that when I picked it up yesterday morning, that was the page that was marked.